In the opening scene, the story begins in the evening of a day in the year 1945. A young nurse and widow by the name of Hannah Norris visits a movie house with her friend Maudie. Coincidentally, the newsreel comes on, and everyone watches as the city of New York pays its tribute to the American foot soldiers returning from the war, with gliders flying overhead as the city roars its welcome home to the 13,000 veterans who fought from Sicily and Italy. Hannah can no longer bear the thoughts of her late husband as she watches the soldiers. She runs outside to burst into tears. Thankfully, Maudie comes running after her to console her. Seeing all those soldiers coming home breaks Hannah's heart, knowing that her husband is never going to come back home to her. Maudie comforts her and tries to soothe the aching heart of her beloved friend. In a bid to distract Hannah, she suggests they go have a look at some gazebos that are being decorated at the square. Hannah sees Mr. McGregor and decides to go have a little chat with him to find out how he's coping with rheumatism and his shoulders. They converse for a while, and the old man reveals his worries concerning Hannah, who is always taking care of others inclusive of him. He reminds her that she also needs someone to take care of her. Then he asks if she will be coming to the caroling later when Maudie comes with a gigantic star. They burst out laughing seeing how she's popping her head through the star she's carrying. The next day at work, Hannah is going about her duties when she meets with a colleague, Julia, who shows off her finger in excitement. Hannah is happy to realize that Julia just got engaged to Frank, a soldier who is receiving treatment at their facility. Julia thanks her for introducing her to Frank, and then drags Hannah to come meet Frank on the bed he is lying on. Hannah offers to take a photograph of them with her camera, and as she watches the lovebirds, Julia happily listens to Frank's tales about some things he witnessed in Italy. Seeing the excited couple brings back memories of her late husband, and in a bid not to destroy their moment, she congratulates them and walks away. Julia notices the sudden change in Hannah's mood, so she quickly runs to apologize for not considering how she feels, but Hannah stops her from apologizing. She urges her to look forward to tomorrow where the happiness lies. Her braveness gets Julia wondering where she gets her strength from. Hannah walks away from Julia to go take her rounds, and soon after, she ends up reading a story for Toby, a little boy who's a patient at the hospital. She listens to him educate her about the Devico comet happening that night, which will only reoccur in about 71 years. Conversing with a little one makes her impressed with his knowledge. Maudie soon comes to interrupt the discussion, requesting to take her away. Hannah forgets her camera with Toby, so he decides to just check it out while she's away. Maudie drags her to where the carols are being sung. Hannah decides to make a phone call for Toby since it's not too far from the musical. She wants to put a call through to the orphanage, so they will come to take him home for Christmas. She feels pity for the little boy and wants to help in the best way she can. Unfortunately, their numbers didn't go through after several tries. She walks back to join the rest of her colleagues who are singing enthusiastically in the spirit of Christmas. Towards evening, Hannah's shift comes to an end, so she picks up her bag and heads out to drive home. On getting to her house, she decides to go through her husband's photo album, when a stray dog starts barking in front of her door. She opens up, and the lost dog runs into her house. She tries to reach anyone who can help over the phone, but she is unable to, so she decides to try locating its owner by following its tag. Fortunately, she locates the dog's family, and everyone is excited to see it. They thank her for saving them the heartbreak of having to spend Christmas without their pet dog. The woman of the house tries to make Hannah stay the night at their place, since the snow will be coming down heavily any moment. But she insists on heading back since she doesn't live too far away. Hannah drives by herself through the snowy night, and she finds it quite difficult navigating through the slippery road. Her windscreen is beginning to get covered up in the snow. She struggles with the steering until she lands into a pile of snow. After several futile attempts to get her car off the pile, she steps out of the vehicle. She sees a door not too far off, so she decides to run through the wind to find shelter. As she runs towards the shed, the Christmas comet can be seen in the sky. The atmosphere gets more windy, blowing snow in every direction, and as she enters through the door, the shed starts shaking violently until she falls, hits her head, and immediately passes out. By the time she regains herself, the snowstorm is over and a new day has come. She picks up her bag and climbs through the window because the door is locked. Hannah walks towards the street wondering what's happening to her. She's seeing fancy cars, skaters, and people holding mobile phones. Everything looks strange to her, and she wonders what's going on. A few people inquire if she's lost, but Hannah is too distraught to even reply to them. A guy places a call to report that she's lost. Meanwhile, on the other street are two cops in their vehicle chatting. They receive the call to locate the missing lady. Hannah spots a dog a short distance away, and it looks like Ruffin, the dog she saved before getting into an accident. After approaching them, she realizes that the owner is blind, so she apologizes for disturbing them. The officers soon locate her, and they come offering her help. They take her to see a doctor, and nothing seems to be wrong with her. The cops and their chief question her some more to know how they can be of help to her. But her answers keep confounding them because she's talking about things that don't add up. The cops think she might be having amnesia, but she very well knows her name, city, date, and even president. The chief suggests they take her to the station because he's beginning to suspect Hannah is a scam as her car is nowhere to be found, and her address card doesn't check out. Plus, there was no storm the previous night. Jake pleads with the chief to let him observe her, and if he finds out that she is just being delusional, he'll take her to the hospital. However, if she's a fraud, he will bring her to the station. Later, Jake takes Hannah to his house, where he is living with his parents and sister Louise before she temporarily moves out. Hannah recognizes the farm. To her, it is Morgan's house where she usually buys milk. She even mentions that they have the best cows. Jake confuses her when he informs her that the property used to be the Smith Farms, which his parents bought back in the 60s and then renovated the buildings. Hannah asks what year they are in because Jake doesn't look like he believes her, and everything seems wrong to her. Jake reveals that they are in 2016. He notices the frightful look on her face, so he suggests they head inside the house first. He had pre-informed his family that he would be bringing in someone who would be living with them for a while, so they are already expecting to have a visitor. His family welcomes them heartily immediately after they enter through the door. George, the stranger who helps call the police to come get Hannah off the street, gets home and shares the incident with his mother, who is suspicious of Hannah. She feels the lady might be pretending not to know what she is doing, as it has become a habit of strangers lately only for them to end up robbing their helper. At Jake's house, his family is discussing Hannah's story, which doesn't seem to make sense. Louise believes no one just lands in Central Falls without knowing how, and her clothes seem to be a little weird. Her little daughter Gwen reminds her mom that Hannah didn't land in their town, but she is from their town based on her story. Jake quiets them down and requests that they allow Hannah to rest and give her some time to find her bearings first. Later, Jake's mother decides to go check up on Hannah to see if she's awake. Jake quickly asks a question to confirm some things that Hannah told him earlier, but his mother seems to be unaware of any Christmas decorations on the gazebo located at the square. His mother walks into Hannah's room calling for her, but she can't find the young lady there. She panics as she calls Jake to inform him that Hannah is gone. Meanwhile, Hannah locates her house, but to her surprise, it's now a shop for organic products. She walks in wondering what's going on as all her things seem to be missing in the house. The owner of the place wonders what could be wrong with her claiming to own the house. She decides to quickly make a call before something else happens. Jake arrives at the house a few minutes later, but he gets informed that Hannah has left the place. He quickly follows the directions given to him in search of her, but she is on her way to check out the hospital where she works. Hannah stops a random stranger, asking why the hospital where she works is now a public library. The lady finds her attitude a bit strange, so she walks away. Jake finds her at the front of the hospital looking distraught and confused. He calms her down and takes her with him. Hannah apologizes for not informing him that she is leaving. She tried to sleep, but couldn't, and she thought going home would make her feel better. But now, she doesn't even know what her home is anymore. Hannah explains that she visited the hospital because today is her friend's shift, and hopefully Dottie will explain what's going on with her. She is confused and doesn't understand what's happening to her. Everything she has always known seems to have disappeared, and she doesn't know if she's dreaming or losing her mind. She understands the look she gets, the way everyone has been looking at her like she's crazy or lying. Jake reveals to her that she is right about their farm being the Morgan place, because it used to be a dairy in the 40s. He assures her that she's going to be okay, and all they need to do is find out what happened to her. The following day, Jake is chopping some wood when Sarah, his sister's friend and colleague, visits their place. She informs him that the chief is not happy, and it'll be advisable for him to hand Hannah over before she runs away. He assures her that Hannah will not run away, because she's just trying to figure out what's happening to her. She advises him to find some evidence that Hannah just popped out of 1945, or else he will start to sound wacky like Hannah does. Inside the house, Jake's mother and Louise give Hannah a change of clothes and shoes. There was some minor misunderstanding because there were no Uggs in 1945 and women wore heels instead. They see the research on the tab. A few minutes later, Hannah comes out looking different than she was and beautiful in the modern outfit. While everyone is going about their duties, she sits with Gwen, who is showing her some stuff from her tab, But Hannah is finding it hard to understand how so many things can be inside the little object. Gwen tries explaining what a computer is, but she isn't getting it, so she decides to browse for items from the year that Hannah was born. Hannah recognizes some items like the cup set her mom used to have, but she is surprised to see how much the items are being sold for. In the next scene, Jake and Sarah are eating in a restaurant, and she brings up the topic of Hannah. She is paranoid and thinks Hannah is just pretending to not know how she got into their town, claiming she time traveled to the present. An old man having his meal not too far off listens to their conversation for a while before getting up and exiting the restaurant. Jake thinks there is a possibility that something extraordinary happened to Hannah, so he decides to visit the shed Hannah woke up in while he was on duty. He looks through the place, and surprisingly, he finds a bag that he believes must belong to her, because it doesn't look like anything women in his days will carry around. He takes the bag back to his office and checks out the things in it when Sarah comes into the office. She checks out some of the stuff, still insisting that Hannah might just need a house to stay, because Louise told her that she is making herself quite comfortable in their house. Jake feels she's just being paranoid. He tells her to quit playing with the evidence, while he takes a look at an item which looks at the small bottle of Paris Moon perfume he finds in Hannah's bag. At the house, Hannah is helping Gwen decorate the gingerbread house with some icings, while she recounts the times she and Maudie used to do the same activities before the war started and sugar was rationed. Louise interrupts the flow of their discussion by telling Gwen to go to sleep as it's past her bedtime. Gwen requests that Hannah read to her. In the course of Hannah reading a bedtime story to Gwen, the little girl reveals that the owner of the science fair, Mr. Cook, bought an old building and made it into a library, and he usually tells them to believe in everything with an open mind. Hannah gets to hear more interesting facts about Mr. Cook. She's surprised to hear that the man believes in time travel. She wears a puzzled look on her face, which soon changes into a smile as Louise comes to take Gwen to bed. At the office, Jake searches through the internet in an attempt to make some findings about the perfume in Hannah's bag, and he's astonished to realize that it dates back to the 40s. In the next scene, Mr. Cooks walks around the library while listening to the radio broadcast about the DeVico comet, which is appearing for the first time since 71 years ago. George is getting scolded by his mom for spending more time on his phone instead of walking so they can go get some things. She suddenly spots Hannah and Jake's family walking into a clothes store that sells old clothes. So she walks over to spy on them. On getting inside, they show the seller Hannah's photo, inquiring if she had come by to buy a whole outfit of 1940s clothes. The man doesn't recognize the woman in the pictures, but he suggests they purchase some clothes from him. Her mother reprimands her for being too suspicious of Hannah instead of being supportive, especially during this Christmas period. Gwen excitedly comes to show them the hat from the 40s, which Hannah puts on her head. George's mom, who has been watching through the glass, calls her husband to inform him of her findings. The store guy comes with a photo of a decorated gazebo, and Louise calls her mom to come check it out. It looks exactly as Hannah describes it to be. He reveals that it's part of the traditions parents pass down to their kids. But as time went by, kids no longer care about such traditions. When they get back home, Hannah recounts the times when their neighbors would come out together to decorate the gazebo. They would all dance, drink hot chocolate, and sing carols. Gwen pleads with her mother to allow her carol. Louise obliges her daughter, and she's got an even better idea. Jake and Sarah purchase some gifts, but she goes on and on about Hannah, who should be arrested for security reasons. Jake endures the walk as he has no other option but to listen to her make an issue out of Hannah's situation. He gets home to meet Hannah staring into space with a worried look on her face. She shares how she feels with his family. She feels happy yet guilty for being happy, and she has never experienced a Christmas like this back where she was. Hannah has never been in a big family, even before she married her husband who perished in the war, and now things have never been the same for her. Jake consoles her, assuring her that she now has his family and him, so she need not think too much about things. He decides to play an album and takes her hand for a dance. Sarah, Louise, and her mother walk into the living room to see the both of them dancing. The look of surprise on their faces makes Jake feel uncomfortable, but he covers it up with a smile. Later, Jake approaches his mom, who is wrapping up some gifts. He informs her that the dance is harmless, and he's just trying to help Hannah feel better. But she tells him to render the apology to Sarah, who had a heartbroken look on her face, seeing him dance with Hannah. Louise walks up to them dressed in an old-fashioned costume. She informs Jake that the idea was inspired by Hannah, and they will all go out caroling tomorrow like an old-fashioned Christmas. She hands Jake the clothes she picked for him. Their mother still insists that he apologizes to Sarah, and Louise calls him a dope for failing to notice the look on her face. Jake wonders what's going on because he didn't offend Sarah, or maybe there's some secret female language thing he's missing. At the office the next day, Jake notices the awkwardness between him and Sarah. He tries to ease the air by starting up a conversation. She informs him that the people are worried about the stranger they are supposed to be investigating, but in reality, he has the hots for her. Sarah makes her jealousy look like she's worried about the people, and instead of investigating the suspect, Jake seems to be falling in love. He laughs and tries to sort the issue, but she won't let him, so he ends up inviting her to come carol with them later tonight. It's nighttime, and Louise takes her family to go carol from house to house. Several individuals join them, making the experience more fun. Hannah suddenly spots a person walking into a house carrying two dogs. She recognizes the house as the one she visited to drop off the dog, named Ruffin, the night the snow incident happened. Jake walks behind her as she walks over to have a proper look at the place. The place now has a fence and is now converted to a kennel. Hannah shares that day's incident before she drove her car into the snow. Next, they all head to the town square and Lousy shows Hannah the war memorial, which she already knows honors the town's men who were lost in the war. Hannah looked worried as she couldn't find her husband's name. She gets back home crying her eyes out, wondering why her husband's name isn't on the war memorial, because he also perished in the war. At George's home, he arrives home from the carol, and his mother gets all paranoid. She's been texting him since, but he didn't reply. She asks where he has been the whole time, and he shares the activity he engaged in with Hannah and how fun it was caroling. She can't believe that he has been on the streets singing the whole time. His mother decides to go ask Hannah a few questions, as it is better safe than sorry. Mrs. Jones meets with Jake to get to their house. She expresses her concerns without even allowing Jake to talk. Sarah steps in to calm the situation. She assures her that the Central Fall Police Department is working on it, and when they are ready to issue a statement, she will be the first to know. She encourages her to head back home and allows them to unravel things themselves. After Mrs. Jones takes her leave, Sarah suggests they do something because she believes Hannah is making things up. She claims her husband passed away in the war, yet her husband's name isn't on the war memorial. Jake feels something strange must have happened, so he shows her the Paris Moon perfume he found in Hannah's bag. He reveals that the perfume was popular in the 1940s, and they stopped making it in the 60s. Currently, there's no trace of it anywhere for her to just pick it up from. What makes it more interesting is that when he had the lab test, the content had not oxidized yet. Inside the house, Hannah is arranging her clothes when a key falls out from one of the clothes. She picks it up and keenly stares at it. The following morning, she sits the rest of the family down, expressing how she feels about her situation. She recounts how she told her friend Dottie about a week ago right outside the moving house that nothing ever changes by blubbering. Since she doesn't know if she will ever get home again, she intends to make the best of things while she's around with them. She has decided to find happiness and some way to be useful and just stop wishing things would be different. She drops the key she found and reveals that she may have found a solution for the town's Christmas lights. At work, Sarah suggests they invite Mrs. Jones to come meet Hannah to know what she's like. Hopefully, Mrs. Jones will stop being a pain. At Jones' residence, she informs her husband that she's going to the library. Mrs. Jones meets up with Hannah at the library, which used to be the hospital where she works. She and the rest of Jake's family watch as Hannah recalls where the wards were located in her time. But the whole place looks different now that she can't even find the door, which is supposed to be right in front of them. Gwen shifts a book and reveals that there is a door just behind the shelf. Hannah smiles and informs them that the door goes down to the storage room. She takes the lead and walks them through the door. They are surprised that they never knew that place existed in the library. She opens a locker, and to everyone's utmost surprise, there are a bunch of items and decoration materials right there. Mr. Cooks suddenly walks into their midst and approaches Hannah. He shares that he has always wondered what's in that locker, and he's glad to see her again. Hannah wonders where he must have known her. This is when Gwen reminds her that he's the man she told her about the other day. She apologizes for intruding, but Mr. Cooks requests to show her something. So he takes them all down to his house. His assistant serves them some tea, while he shares the reason he tore up the old hospital and made it into a library. He recounts how he grew up lonely being a child of war. He had no friends, so he found solace in books. He reveals that he has heard quite a lot about her and the time travel, but he invited her because he wants to see how she's doing. Hannah's face lights up, because at least someone seems to believe her. He further hands back her camera, which has been with him, and calls her Nurse Hannah. He reveals that he is the little boy Toby, who was admitted to the hospital where she works. Hannah falls to the chair in awe and surprise. seeing how little Toby has aged. Mr. Cooks's dogs come running all around, and he shoos them away. He takes her back memory lane to when she saved the lost dog, and the owner was so grateful that she came to the hospital to thank her. However, they didn't meet her, so someone told them to repay the favor by reading to him because he was her favorite boy in the hospital. Hannah laughs and suspects that it must have been Julia or Dottie. Mr. Cooks reveals that the couple took him home with them after hearing that she hoped he wouldn't have to spend Christmas alone. They adopted him, and their daughter became his sister Clara. His adopted mother, Sue, realized how important Ruffin was to the family, so they started a kennel named after Ruffin, which is why there are so many golden retrievers all around now. Hannah smiles and tries to take a photo of him playing with the dogs, but she realizes that she is out of film. She asks about her friend, Dottie, and he informs her that she is still alive. He offers to take her to see Dottie. They arrive at where Dottie has been taken care of. Unfortunately, Dottie is old and doesn't really respond or say much anymore. Hannah tries talking to her, and after several attempts, Dottie's eyes open widely as she recognizes her friend. She tries to speak, but Hannah can't make out the words. Jake asks Hefor to come see a photo, which is the only personal thing that Dottie's got. She takes a look at the photograph of a comet. She turns her back and finds a letter she addressed to Dottie informing her friend that she is in the big city. It makes no sense to her because she never lived in a big city. She realizes that the letter is dated August 16th, 1946, which is her marriage anniversary. Hannah discovers that her husband Chet made it home. The reason why his name is not on the war memorial. She is glad that her husband, who was lost in the war, found his way home eventually. Mr. Cooks reveals that Dottie was trying to say comet and not comment as they thought. Hannah, Jake, and Mr. Cooks read some more about the DeVico comet with an orbital period of 71 years. And they found out that today, which is December 22nd, will make it exactly 71 years since the last comet. Mr. Cooks thinks back to the day the comet happened when he was a boy. Her car was found, but she was nowhere in sight. He makes them understand that the whole comet thing was a miracle, and she did it without even knowing she did. Hannah remembers feeling lost and purposeless, but now she believes in miracles and no longer feels the same way about herself. Mr. Cooks tells her to believe that the Christmas comet tonight will take her back home since she now believes in miracles. Getting back home, Hannah confesses how much she will miss Jake and his family. She's afraid she might forget something. She intends to retrace her steps exactly and change her clothes into what she is wearing. They get inside and Jake shares their findings with the others. Hannah comes out fully dressed in her clothes, but she's worried at the possibility of it not working. Jake and Gwen assure her that it's going to work if she believes, because it's a Christmas miracle. Gwen gives her one last hug. Jake accompanies her to the shed, and Hannah makes him realize that he and Sarah are made for each other, just like she and Chet. They were childhood friends, and it turns out she's the last to realize he is her true love. She encourages him to do the needful before walking into the shed. They bid each other quite an emotional goodbye as he opens the door for her to walk inside. Jake heads back to the town square to join the others. He spots Sarah coming, so he approaches her and places a kiss on her forehead. She wonders what has changed, or if he has lost it, but she still enjoys his warm embrace. Everyone applauds and cheers in excitement as the Christmas lights used to decorate the gazebo come on. They soon start caroling and Hannah can hear them from the shed, where she is sitting waiting to be transported back home. Soon everyone quiets down as the comet begins. They watch it in awe. Dottie and Mr. Cooks also watch the comets in amazement from the various locations. The following morning, almost everyone gathers at the front of the shed to see if Hannah is gone, or she's still in there. Jake and Mr. Cooks take the lead. After looking all around, they don't see Hannah anywhere. They come back out to announce to the others waiting outside that she has returned home. The crowd is excited and happy for her. Mrs. Jones walks inside to see for herself. Mr. Cooks shares copies of photos from Hannah's camera, which he got printed out. Jake sees a picture of his grandparents who happen to be Julia and Frank. Mr. Cooks reveals that Hannah was the one who introduced them. Jake's mother gets emotional because if Hannah hadn't introduced them, none of them would have been alive. She shows Gwen the photograph of her great-grandparents. Hannah arrives back in 1945. She is busy trying to remove her car from the snow pile when her husband suddenly shows up. She runs to embrace the love of her life, whom she had initially given up all hope of ever seeing again.